Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is masterfrogez here coming at you with another Yu-Gi-Oh deck profile. This one is one of my favorite decks. It's probably not quite as tournament worthy nowadays, but it will definitely frustrate anyone going against it despite what you're going. You may not win, but you're definitely going to give them a run for their money. Now, what this is Volcanics. This is a newer Volcanics build that I did that is basically focused around just harassment. Your opponent won't be able to get much off in this dueling against this, and I suppose that's why it's so universal. So, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? First of all, we have, starting with the monsters, 3 Volcanic Rocket. Volcanic Rocket, for those of you that don't know, whenever he is summoned, normal summon or special summoned, I can get a Blaze Accelerator card from my deck or graveyard to my hand. Now, most of the time you're going to be using that, just getting it from your deck, and you'll see why. Next is 3 Volcanic Shell. Volcanic Shell, once per turn, when it's in your graveyard, I can pay 500 life points to get another from your deck to your hand. So that you're going to be using for draw power as well as just thinning out your deck. But not so much as you're going to be using this next card, which is probably the most important card in the game, or not in the game, but in the deck, which is Volcanic Scattershot. Scattershot, whenever he is sent to the graveyard, doesn't matter how. When he's sent to the graveyard, your opponent takes 500. Now, when he is sent to the graveyard, you can send the other 2 from your hand or deck to the graveyard to wipe your opponent's field. As far as their monsters, not their back row. So it's a Raigeki, and they take 1,500 because they take 500 for each one that's sent to the graveyard. And this can be sent in any manner or form. Being discarded for another card, being foolish burialed is another way of having this as just a shotgun that's waiting, and of course your Blaze Accelerator, which we will get to. And this next card is why the deck doesn't run out of steam, ever. This is the Royal Firestorm Guards. For those of you that don't know, when Royal Firestorm Guard is normal summoned, I get 4 Pyro monsters from my graveyard, shuffled back into the deck, and then draw 2. So, he's real good for draw power, as well as getting all 3 scatter shots back, and a rocket, or a shell, or whatever, really whatever you want. If you really want an endless loop, then you can grab another Firestorm Guard from your deck, or from your graveyard, and send it back as well. Endless fun. Next is Volcanic Counter. Volcanic Counter is a game saver, just one of it, though. Mainly just used for discarding, if you can get it to the graveyard or whatever. It's not a target for Foolish in any way, because Foolish has better things to do in this game, or in this deck. But Volcanic Counter, when it's in your graveyard, if you take battle damage, you can remove it. Your opponent takes the exact same amount of battle damage. So, seeing as how this is burn and just harassment, odds are your opponent's going to have less life points than you. This can save the game at points if they try to swing for something heavy that can't quite get you, but will definitely get them. Last of the Volcanic monsters is Volcanic Doomfire. I'm actually using him subbed out at the moment for another card, which I'll mention whenever I get to it. But he's a really good card just to keep in here. He's not a main. He's not something to bet on. Definitely not something to bet on. I almost never summon him, not because he's hard to, but just because by the time I've drawn him, game's already over. He's not a main strategy whatsoever, but he is very easy to get out whenever you do draw him, and whenever you do get him on the field, there's no regrets anywhere except for your opponent, because he will very, very quickly make an inconvenience out of anything your opponent tries to summon. Next we have 2 Summoner Monk. Mainly, he's used to get out your rockets, so that you can instantly, because rocket doesn't matter how he's summoned, and he can instantly search out your Blaze Accelerator. So, that's mainly what he's used for, not really for anything else. And then, finally, Thunder King Ryo, just because Thunder King is Thunder King. You don't want to keep him on the field for long. If you want to do anything as far as as far as searching with any other cards that you sub in, but however, he does actually help you out here in the fact that it's, if I remember correctly, yeah, he doesn't allow any player to add cards from their deck to their hand unless it's drawing. This whole deck is draw power, just drawing, not actual searching except for Summoner Monk. And then as far as all the other card effects, it sends things to the graveyard, so it's just constant deck thinning, and Thunder King is basically, you are the only exception to him. And he's just waiting to take out anything that your opponent special summons. So that's it for the monsters of this deck. Now on to the Magic. Magic we run 3 Pot of Duality because, as I previously mentioned, I don't do much special summoning, but I do a lot of drawing. We have 3 Mystical Space Typhoon, just because harassment. We have 1 Magic Planter. Now this is actually the card that Doomfire is subbed for, a second Magical Planter. However, this card is very, very hard for me to get a hold of. I send a continuous trap I control to the graveyard and draw 2 cards straight off it. You're going to see when we get to this trap-heavy deck why that is so mischievous. Then finally we have Lightning Vortex, because Lightning Vortex will never go out of style, I don't care what anyone says. 1 Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial has several uses. You can play him first turn to get a shell to your deck, or to your graveyard, and then just start thinning out your deck that way. Or if you want to keep this in your hand and just wait for your opponent to get a huge swing of monsters, you can play Foolish Burial to send your Scattershot, and then right there, this is a 1 card, this is another form of a Raigeki in this deck. Any card that sends anything that could send a Scattershot to the graveyard is your waiting Raigeki. And you can do it so many times. Finally, Wildfire, the Dark Hole of the deck. This I've actually never had to use yet. Out of all the duels that I've done, I've never actually had a chance to use this, but imagine it has its uses should your deck fully run out of steam and you are faced with something where you can't Scattershot them right away. Another thing about this deck, it's not attached to its monsters. If its monsters go, that's fine. Next for the traps, oh, so many traps. We have your king of the deck, Blaze Accelerator Reload. Now, the reason why a lot of people, whenever they use this deck, they will get this to the field and instantly try to get it off the field themselves. They'll use Magical Planter to it, which I agree as far as Magical Planter goes, but they'll do anything to get this off the field. I've even seen some people MST their own reloads. And the theory behind that is the fact that reload, whenever you can discard a sorry, my mind's a little fuzzy right now. You can discard a Volcanic once per turn to draw a card. So there's where your draw power comes in with all these discardable monsters and your shell and all that. But also whenever it's in the graveyard, you can remove it from play to send a Volcanic from your deck to the graveyard. So that's your waiting Scattershot. At any point that this is sitting there, you don't even need to have Scattershot in your hand. If it's in the graveyard just waiting, your opponent gets a big heavy hand or heavy field, remove it, wipes the field instantly. Or their monsters anyway, which in this deck is what counts the most. 3 Reckless Greed, because we don't really care about the draw phase as much as we care about draw power. 2 Call of the Haunteds, because it's not really that big of a use, but I guess it has its uses every so often. We have 1 Fiendish Chain and 1 Shadow Spell. The Shadow Spell is a sub for another Fiendish Chain, so I'm just going to go ahead and slide that right there. And then finally 1 ofs, we have 1 Phoenix Wing Blast, again for harassment and discard. We have 1 Bottomless Trap Hole, and we have 1 Compulsory. So, trap heavy, a little bit. And so, yeah, let's see. So, that's traps. I do not run a side deck with this. I do not run an extra deck. For those of you that will come to know me, I do not run any side decks at all. I rarely run extra decks. I just love the archetypes that don't use them. I do have a few, but those are for a later date. So, that is my Volcanic, pure harassment and heavy draw power build. Works great against... I've tested everything from Twilight decks to Shadal's, all bunch of different things that were competitive way back when and even now, and it's always been able to hold its own, even against Darklaw, a card that renders my graveyard useless. It's been able to work perfectly fine against. And that's my deck profile. Enjoy my super awesome SAO mat. And ladies and gentlemen, I will see you in the next video.